your name being identified or anything. So here we go, heads up, an introduction to brain health. This is me, Jan Robson. I'm the Provincial Education Coordinator at the Alzheimer Society of BC. And today's agenda, we'll be looking at a few things, just a little basic information on what goes wrong in the brain. So if we're talking about keeping it healthy, what's the alternative? What are some of the changes that happen when it's not working well? A little bit of the latest research on reducing risk for dementia. And then we'll look at health measures that you can take at any age and integrate into your daily life. Things that you can do that will at least maximize your chances of living with a reasonably healthy brain. So what goes wrong in the brain? Well, basically what you have on the screen here, for those of you that are just listening on the phone, we have a couple of, it's a drawing, but a couple of cross-sectional drawings of brains. On the left-hand side, there's a cross-section of a healthy brain. What you notice with that cross-section is that, first of all, size, you know, it's a decent size compared to the one on the right overall. And as well, there are very few gaps within the brain. It's fairly solid. You can see the folds of the cerebral cortex, but it's also fairly solid. But Alzheimer's disease is an organic brain disease, and it does result in the death of brain cells. And so what happens over time is what you see on the right-hand side of the screen, which is overall shrinkage. The brain itself shrinks, extreme shrinkage of the cerebral cortex, and then, as the diagram indicates, severely enlarged ventricles. In other words, gaps. There's big gaps within the brain. And if you think of our brains as being telecommunications networks, really, when you think of all those big gaps that are within the brain, it's almost like these messages have to leap over big gaps, and they can't. So you see the shrinkage over all these gaps inside, and you realize that if the person is having trouble finding words, if they're having trouble dressing themselves, feeding themselves, little wonder. This is a telecommunications network that has loads of downed wires, if you want. And you get a better sense of the challenges the person's facing. They are dealing with an organic brain disease. It's also important to consider that when you look at these, that's not normal. That's not normal aging. And so Alzheimer's disease, other types of dementia, they are not a normal part of aging. Age is a significant risk factor when it comes to developing Alzheimer's disease. But the reality is that still, despite the numbers, the majority of people will not get Alzheimer's disease as they age. You're looking at maybe about 1 in 11 will get Alzheimer's or another dementia over the age of 65. 1 in 3 over the age of 85. Now, 85 is still a pretty reasonably long life for most people, despite the extended lifespans that we're seeing. It's still, you know, fairly old. And 2 out of 3 people, if they live that long, can expect to live to that age without dementia. So it still isn't the norm. It is a disease. Just giving you a little idea of what is normal aging, because there are changes that happen in our brain with normal aging. So what are some of the things that happen with normal aging versus Alzheimer's or another dementia? So normal aging, you might forget a conversation from a year ago. So someone comes up to you and says, you know, when we met last year in the summer, and you're thinking, last year in the summer? Shoot, you know, that's just not, that's normal. Dementia, forgetting recent conversations. When we chatted yesterday, did we chat yesterday? That might be a little more concerning, for sure. Normal aging, forgetting the name of an acquaintance, forgetting words in general, you know, that tip of the tongue situation where you're, I can't think of his name, I can't think of that word. That type of thing is normal for aging. It's normal often when it's not aging, but certainly becomes more common as we age. Forgetting the name of a close family member or a friend, much more concerning. So my son, my son and his name is just not coming to you. That would be more concerning. Normal aging, occasionally forgetting events, missing a doctor's appointment. More concerning, frequently forgetting events. Normal aging, occasional word finding difficulty. Not so normal, frequent pauses and substitutions. And sometimes those substitutions don't make sense. You're putting in words that really don't fit with the context. Another thing that can be a distinguisher, although it's not definitive, normal aging, you might be worried about some of the changes you're seeing. It drives me crazy. I can't think of people's names. But nobody else is worried. Everybody else sees this as just, yeah, that's normal. A little more concerning if you're not worried at all, but your family is. Everybody else around you is seeing changes and seeing challenges that you're experiencing, and you seem oblivious to it. Now, this is not definitive. Some people absolutely are worried, and it is Alzheimer's disease. But sometimes it's a case where other people see it before you do. Now, having said that, what I've just said, not diagnostic, these are just things that are concerning. When you look in the dementia column, they're concerning. You might want to speak to a doctor if you're experiencing that. So when we're talking about maintaining a healthy brain, what we're talking about really is risk reduction. The word prevention should not be used in this context. It sometimes is. You see ads for various health food products or various strategies, and they will sometimes use the word prevention, which is unfortunate. Prevention suggests that if you do X, Y, Z, you will not develop whatever disease it is. So you do X, Y, Z, you won't get Alzheimer's disease. Risk reduction is a little different. Risk reduction basically says if you do X, Y, Z, that's the best you can do to maximize your chances for maintaining a healthy brain. But it might not be enough. You might do everything right, you still may develop the disease. So these are our best bet measures, basically. They're associated with population traits. In other words, risk reduction is a population measure. So if everyone in Canada was to follow really good, solid risk reduction strategies, probably there would be fewer people with Alzheimer's disease in Canada. But for the individual, it may not make a difference. You might follow everything just absolutely religiously and still get Alzheimer's disease. Someone you know might say, I'm not going to bother, life's short, and they do whatever they want. They don't care about any of the risk reduction measures, and they may never develop Alzheimer's disease. So that's where risk reduction versus prevention comes in. There isn't that cause and effect when you're talking risk reduction. So we're talking about things that might reduce the effects of risk factors, but at this point, there are no treatments or drugs that have been proven to prevent or delay the onset of Alzheimer's disease. And actually, researchers are saying if we can find something that would delay the onset of Alzheimer's disease for just 5 years, so just delay the onset for a short period of time, we could cut the incidence by half. So, given the age relatedness of it, if we could just get to the point where we can put it off for 5 years, then we'd be dealing with half the problem that we are dealing with now. So some risk factors you can't do anything about. One of those is genetics. Now, that's been identified by researchers as an important risk factor, but it only plays a large role in a small percentage of cases. So there is a type of Alzheimer's disease that is closely genetically linked. It is a young onset version. If one of your parents has this gene, then he or she will develop Alzheimer's disease, and you have a 50% chance of inheriting that gene, and if you do, you will develop Alzheimer's disease. That's how closely genetically linked it is. It accounts for less than 5% of the total number of cases of Alzheimer's disease. In other situations, Alzheimer's disease is referred to as sporadic, and in these situations, having a close family member with the disease or having had a close family member with the disease, your risk is elevated, but probably only from a lifetime incidence of about 3% to perhaps a lifetime incidence of 15%. So yes, higher risk, but it's still not definitive. Aging is the most significant known risk factor, and I think it's important that we stress that known risk factor. There really wasn't a lot of research done on Alzheimer's disease until probably the last 25, 30 years. And when you're talking about a significant disease process, that's not a long time. That's not a lot of research. So there could be something out there that simply has not gone on the radar yet. But at this point, aging, the most significant known risk factor. So what can you do? Well, brain health, obviously, is vital in the fight against dementia. A healthy lifestyle will benefit your body and your brain. And really, when I go through the slides, the next few slides, so much of it you might just be sitting there thinking, well, yeah, you know, this just makes sense. These are just healthy measures. And that's exactly true. What we're talking about is maintaining a healthy body and mind, and what is healthy for just your overall functioning, for heart, prevention of heart disease, prevention of various other illnesses, is healthy for your brain as well. Risk reduction is the best defense, but as I mentioned, you can do everything right and still get Alzheimer's. This is your best bet. So we'll be looking at ways you can take action in 3 areas: mind, body, and spirit. As with any change, if in fact changes are required for you, some of you listening in today, you might listen through the whole teleworkshop and go, you know what, I'm doing it. I've pretty much got all the bases covered. If that's the case, great. To me, today was worth it for you just to confirm for you that you're on the right path. Some of you may be doing fine in 1 or 2 of those areas, but falling a little short in the 3rd. So basically, if there are areas where you decide by the end of this hour that you need to make some changes, start on a smaller scale and work to improve it. Most of us, if we try to make huge, big changes all at once, we often can, short term. But making those changes, integrating those changes into our lives, changing our lives, generally works better if we make them slow and steady. Try realistic changes and then revisit our goals regularly as we meet the goals that we've set for ourselves. So we'll start with the mind. This is sort of the obvious one. Well, we're talking about brain health. So yes, of course, we have to look at how we can keep our mind healthy. The other 2 may be a little less obvious. So there certainly are things that do often, not with everybody, but often do decline with age. Things like recall, names, facts, words. Some studies suggest that it's really not a case of this recall so much deteriorating in any way. It's a matter of you've had so much information put into this brain over X number of years that at some point the brain starts doing a little bit of filtering. Instead of just taking in all of these facts, you filter. And sometimes you filter out stuff that would have been handy if you'd kept it. But it's a matter of there's been a lot of information has gone into that brain. So names, facts, words can elude you sometimes. You might forget where or from whom you heard something. So there might be a fact that you found really interesting, and so you grabbed onto that fact. When asked afterwards, you're telling somebody about this fact afterwards, they say, oh, that's interesting. Where did you hear that? And you may forget where you heard it. It was important to you that you remember the fact itself. But where you got it from, and then you're starting to think, I wonder, was it the news? Was it the newspaper? Did somebody tell me? That kind of thing can slip by the wayside. The location of household objects can be a bit of a challenge as we age. Details of recent past events. You don't forget the recent past events, but you may forget some details about them. Some abilities like multitasking, reaction time is often slower as we age. There's a lot of things that don't typically decline as we age. Vocabulary. It might take you a second to think of that word, but your vocabulary can continue to be very robust and, in fact, grow as you age. Decision making doesn't have to decline as we age. And decision making is one of those skills that really is a big picture skill. And so sometimes if the little details start to elude us, the big picture thinking doesn't. So your decision making might in fact be better. Creativity, same thing. It's the big picture type of thinking. Your ability to learn doesn't have to decline. You may change the circumstances of your learning. So for example, when you're 20, you may be able to learn new information quite capably while you've got headphones on with music coming through the headphones and people coming in and out of the room. You might be sitting there reading whatever it is you have to study and do quite a good job of remembering it. When you're 75, you might find that those distractions are too much and you need peace and quiet, but you can still learn. Word generation doesn't have to be affected. Paired associate learning, if A, then B, those things don't need to decline as we age. And changes can happen if we work our brains. There was a study that found that 73-year-olds who received 10 brain training sessions improved on thinking tests, reasoning skills, processing new information, and memory. And these results lasted for up to 3 years. So, keeping the brain active, and it doesn't have to be brain training sessions as in formal programs, but keeping it working. That has an effect. It can make a difference. So when we're talking about maintaining mental agility and capacity, part of it is building new connections in our brain. And that's mixing it up. So varying your routine, varying how you do things. And it can be as simple as if you brush your hair with your right hand all the time, switch it up. Brush your hair with your left hand. And that seems silly, but the fact is, if I'm using my right hand to brush my hair, I'm exercising the left-hand side of my brain. Whereas if I use my left hand to brush my hair, I'm exercising the right-hand side. So it mixes it up. It gets us out of those ruts where we don't even think about what we're doing because we're having to be conscious of what we're doing. Playing brain-stimulating games, play ones that you like. Typically we talk about things like crossword puzzles and Sudoku, but if you hate doing those, find ones that you do like. Because I think, if we subscribe to the cod liver oil model of brain training, that's one more thing that we won't continue to do. Find things you enjoy doing. And really just remembering that, old dogs can learn new tricks. We often defeat ourselves, oh, I'm too old for that. I'm too old to learn this, and if we have that attitude, it's very possible we won't learn new things. So keeping our minds open to the very true reality that we can learn new things. Learning new things often helps to, again, shut out distractions. Learn a new language, or at least try, even if you're kind of pathetic at it. Language does wonderful things in terms of keeping our brains active. If you know several languages, teach a language to somebody else. And then, various mind games, there's all sorts of them out there. Reading for pleasure, but also reading to stimulate the brain. Read those Harlequin romances for sure, because they're great for stress reduction, that kind of thing. Escapism. But also read the challenging biographies or the historical novels or things like that get you really concentrating and thinking. Now, I mentioned earlier, if there are areas where you see that you really need to make some changes, it helps to start in smaller pieces and work your way up. And so what I've done for the mind section is look at it as a bronze and silver and gold kind of format, where bronze is you're starting small and then you're building up. So in terms of keeping the mind active to keep your brain healthy, bronze level, it might be as simple as watching less TV. Or if the only thing you watch on TV is the goofy sitcoms, maybe trying for a documentary here and there instead. So, changing your viewing habits. Make an effort to remember names. Again, this is one of those things we often defeat ourselves. Oh, I'm terrible with names. And so, if you have that attitude, often you don't even try. But work at it. So if you go to an exercise class, and you're introduced to two people at that exercise class, Elaine and Sylvia, making an effort to say, hi, Elaine, nice to meet you, Elaine. And then before you leave the class, see you next week, Elaine, where you're really training your brain to remember. You're telling your hippocampus, I want to keep this information. So work at remembering these names. Work at remembering a few phone numbers. If you're using cell phones and various, even not cell phones, even the landlines that have buttons that we can program numbers into, often we get lazy about remembering phone numbers because all we have to do is go into the phone book in our cell phones and press the person's name. Voila, we don't even need to remember. Once we've programmed it in, we don't even need to remember. Try dialing the numbers without the fast dial. Take a different route to work or to the gym so that you're not just, again, habit. Silver level, so you're trying to, up the difficulty level. Try doing mental arithmetic. When you're doing your grocery shopping, putting things in the cart, try adding it together and see how close you come to the final total when you get to the cashier. Do that on a regular basis and see how that works. You get your Visa bill, don't look at the bottom to see the total. Add it up to see how close you come without using pen and paper. Play word games. Draft an original document. Play a musical instrument or learn to play a musical instrument. Try art or craft work. And again, you don't have to be good at it. Just the effort of trying can be really helpful. Moving on to gold level, playing logic games, word games. Working consistently to improve your memory. So I will learn 2 phone numbers this week. I'll learn 3 phone numbers next week. I'll learn 4, that kind of thing where you're really making an effort to do it, concentrated effort, going to the grocery store without your list and then going home and comparing to the list you have at home to see how well you did. Memorizing a poem, a recipe, a team roster, again, learning a language, taking a course, all of these things keep your mind engaged. So remember, variety, doing things you enjoy so that you will continue to do them, and really trying to get out of those mental ruts that we so often get into. The body. And, when we think of the body, we're talking about our brains here, and we're talking about keeping our bodies healthy. Sometimes it's, well, what does that have to do with my thinking? Well, the fact is, we're connected. The body is attached, the knee bone's attached to the thigh bone, connected to the thigh bone, and the body is attached to the head. And if your body is healthy, you've got a good a good blood flow to your brain is more likely to be healthy as well. So keeping your body healthy is every bit as important when it comes to brain health as keeping your mind active. What's good for your heart is good for your brain. Cardiovascular health is linked to brain health. There's a link between Alzheimer's disease and heart disease, stroke, diabetes. All of these things have been found to be risk factors for Alzheimer's disease. So when we're talking about body health, long-term healthy lifestyle choices can help maintain brain function. Now, any of these measures I'm talking about this afternoon, if you already have Alzheimer's disease, they aren't going to fix it. They're not going to repair damage that's been done, but they can help you function better at this moment in time. So eating a good diet, exercising, keeping your brain as active as you were able to, given the stage of your disease. All of these things can help you function better now, but they're not going to fix any damage that's been done. So when it comes to keeping the body healthy, you want to keep your numbers in mind, the critical health indicators. Now, I'm not going to, if you have the slides, you have the numbers here. I'm not going to go into the numbers, the levels of cholesterol and whatnot, but just keep in mind that there are a few critical health indicators that you want to keep your eye on in terms of maintaining health. One is your cholesterol. Get it checked. Make sure as much as you can, you keep it within normal levels, and you find out how you can work to get it to normal levels if it's not. Whoops. Blood pressure. Now, particularly when you're in middle age, blood pressure is huge. Keeping your blood pressure within normal range. And if not, if you can't do it yourself, seeing a doctor about ensuring that you are doing what you can food-wise, and often in some cases medication-wise, but keeping it within normal limits. Your glucose level. I mentioned just a few minutes ago that diabetes is a risk factor for Alzheimer's disease. So keeping your glucose level within normal range. Another number that I don't have here is your weight. Checking to make sure that your body mass index is within normal levels. Exercising to maintain a healthy body weight, not to be model thin, but a healthy body weight. Exercising. So far, the studies that have been done, if you were going to do one thing and one thing only to maintain your brain health, the best thing you can do is exercise your body. And, again, when we're thinking the brain, often it's, what's the one best thing you can do? Well, exercise my brain. And yes, that's important. But in fact, keeping the whole package exercised is even more important. Exercise increases blood flow, brings more oxygen and glucose to the brain. And so it's crucial to keeping that brain oxygenated and having that blood flow in there and keeping it healthy. If there are any medical issues that you have, do check with your doctor. Make sure that you're doing physical activities that are okay for you. You don't want to be doing physical activities that could potentially benefit your brain, but in fact result in serious health issues otherwise. So do check with your doctor if you're at all concerned about any other health issues that you might have. It's important to exercise for 15 to 30 minutes, 3 to 4 times a week. Exercise really meaning that you elevate that your heart rate significantly, 15 to 30 minutes, 3 to 4 times a week. Now this is one of those things also that do what you can. At least start with what you can. Now maybe you think, I don't have time. I can't, no matter how I look at my schedule, I cannot see exercising for 30 minutes 4 times a week. It's just not going to work. So that's where you want to start doing the little bits and pieces. Park your car at the far end of the parking lot when you go to get groceries. So you have that extra little distance. You have to carry your groceries that extra little distance. When you get to work, don't take the elevator, take the stairs. Little things like that add up. Great if you can do, the goal would be to do the 30 minutes 4 times a week. But until you are able to reach that goal, fit it in where you can. Housework. Anybody that says housework is not exercise hasn't done it, or hasn't done it very much or very well. That's exercise. So look at all the pieces of your life and where you can get this exercise. Make it a part of your daily routine, and regular and varied. Just as with exercising your brain, variety helps when it comes to exercising your body as well. Set realistic goals. As I mentioned, park far away in the parking lot if you have to, but do what you can. Set goals that you're able to reach. When we set unrealistic goals and we don't reach them, then too often what happens is we say, well, forget it. So set goals where you at least have a chance of having some success, because you have that little bit of success. You feel good about that success, and you're more motivated to do a little more. And that's where choosing activities that you enjoy can certainly help too. Physical activities can help you feel better. They reduce stress, and stress is a risk factor for Alzheimer's disease. They help you maintain overall good health, prevent muscle weakness, improve mood. Important thing with preventing muscle weakness, as we age, falls become more likely if our muscles are weaker. And with falls can come head trauma. And so, if we can keep our muscles stronger, have the whole framework be more robust, we can prevent the falls, we can at least eliminate one source of risk, as in head injuries. There was a study done in February of 2013 by the Ontario Brain Institute, and they looked at 871 research articles, and they further analyzed 24 randomized controlled trials, 21 prospective cohort studies. So basically they were looking at over 900 different studies. And what they found was in older adults, without Alzheimer's disease, those who were very physically active were almost 40% less likely to develop Alzheimer's disease as those who were inactive. They concluded that more than 1 in 7 cases of Alzheimer's disease could be prevented if everyone who's currently inactive were to become physically active at a level consistent with current activity recommendations. That's pretty significant. And so when I mentioned, if you could do one thing, it would be to get off the couch. There's a pretty good argument for it. And that is not the only, all of these studies were reviewed together, but there have been more studies since that time, and they really are consistent in terms of the beneficial effects of exercise. Now we're looking at keeping the body healthy. There's also lifestyle factors to take into account. Alcohol consumption. If you already do drink alcohol, having a glass of wine with your dinner can be very healthy, particularly red wine. Although doctors do say if you don't drink at all, the health benefits are not such that you should start drinking. Do keep in mind, though, 1 glass of wine with dinner, good. 1 bottle of wine with dinner, not so good, So as with so many things, moderation. Smoking, this is probably one of those ones where moderation really doesn't come into play. It really doesn't. It doesn't have anything to recommend it in terms of body health, also brain health. Same thing with chemicals and street drugs. And some of these things that we do, we tend to, minimize the overall effect. But they can have a devastating effect on body health and therefore brain health. Head trauma, I mentioned earlier. Concussions are a risk factor for Alzheimer's disease, particularly the cumulative effect, and also particularly concussions where a person has lost consciousness. So just being a little more aware when you're doing activities. Should I wear a helmet? If you're going figure skating for the first time in 30 years, might not be a bad plan to wear a helmet because you might be falling on your keister, but you might be banging your head at the same time. So, being really vigilant about opportunities, if you want to call it that, for falls and trying to prevent them. Fall-proofing your home. Looking at your home with a critical eye. Are there things that I could trip over? Is there too much clutter in my home so that I am more likely to trip and potentially bang my head? If you can't look at it with a critical eye, get somebody else to come in and say, you know what, that little rug by the kitchen sink, if it was me, I'd be tripping on it all the time. And eliminating some possibilities for falls within your home as well. Sleep. Pretty impossible to talk about a healthy body without talking about sleep. As a society, we are chronically tired, that we don't get enough sleep. There's almost that pride in how little sleep, people, I need 8 hours of sleep a night. I managed to get by on just 5.5. And it's almost that smug kind of source of pride that so often we have. You maybe can get by on 5.5. That doesn't mean it's good for you. Sleep helps the immune system. When we're sleeping, human growth hormone is released. Metabolism of nutrients occur during our sleep time. Memory and learning are processed when we sleep. So it's almost like that's our time for our brains to go, okay, this is what I learned today. Let's get it solidified. And we all know if we're tired, we haven't had enough sleep, our ability to handle stress, to solve problems, to cope with life's difficulties is compromised. You're tired, you're impatient, you can't think straight. Oh, I could just get a good night's sleep. You're not operating at your optimum. Another thing that happens when we sleep that's particularly significant for Alzheimer's disease, one of the proteins involved with Alzheimer's disease is a protein called beta amyloid. And beta amyloid, we all have it in our brains. And what happens is when we sleep, the excess beta amyloid is swept out of our brains into our bloodstream. And beta amyloid, if it collects in our brains, tends to misfold and it forms what are called plaques. And these plaques, see if I can get my hand on the screen here. If my hand was a brain cell and my watch strap was a beta amyloid plaque that accumulated outside that brain cell, it functions as a barrier so that when messages are trying to get through, I have a message that needs to get through to this brain cell, it can't because of this beta amyloid plaque. And then ultimately this brain cell will die. So we need to sweep out the excess beta amyloid. And that happens when we're sleeping. So if sleep is severely compromised, there's more likely to be that buildup. Nutrition-wise, as with so many of the topics that I'm talking about here, variety. And fresh food, basically, is your best bet. If you look at your grocery store, shop around the outskirts of the grocery store as opposed to the interior aisles where there's more processed foods. Cereals, breads, grain products, vegetables, fruit, lower fat dairy products, leaner meats, food prepared with little or no fat, avoiding processed foods as much as possible. Often the Mediterranean diet is touted as being one of the better diets in terms of heart health and brain health. So that's olive oil, it's a lot of fresh food and not a lot of meat either. We need to work as much as possible to achieving and maintaining a healthy body weight, as I mentioned earlier, limiting salt, alcohol, caffeine, although I want to say about caffeine, limiting it, but we don't need to avoid it. Studies have shown that up to about 4 cups of coffee a day can actually be beneficial to brain health. Portions, you don't need to starve yourself, but the supersizing it. Any of you that saw Morgan and Spurlock's expose, if you want, of McDonald's and the whole supersize movement, don't supersize it. Keep your portions moderate. And look at eating a rainbow of colors. Sort of saturated kind of colors that tend to have more antioxidants in them. So the blue-purple, the blueberries, blackberries, plums, greens, broccoli, peas, spinach, avocados, the white, tan, brown spectrum, bananas, potatoes, turnips, orange, yellow, grapefruit, squash, peaches, red, beets, raspberries, tomatoes, rhubarb, pomegranate. All of these things are really good for our brains. Nuts. One nut that's really good for your brain is a walnut. Now, if you look at that walnut, particularly when it's out of the shell, but even in the shell, I think it's interesting because what does it look like? It looks like a little mini brain, and they are good for your brains. Water is essential for your health. 6 to 8 glasses of water or green tea daily. Black tea is also helpful. It helps for recovery from stress. And green tea does contain antioxidants, jasmine tea as well. So having that variety of tea, water, bit of coffee, that's helpful for your body. So basically working at not so much thinking about your body as eating to keep a healthy brain, but eating to keep a healthy you, and that will benefit all aspects of your body. Lastly, but not least, is the spirit. Whoops. Albert Einstein said there are only 2 ways to live your life. One is as though nothing is a miracle. The other is as though everything is a miracle. You get that joy in the raindrop in the puddle that children have. And if you can approach life with that sense of wonder and that joy and that curiosity, that's a wonderful thing to help keep your brain as healthy as possible for as long as possible. One of the ways to feed our spirit is social connection. Reach out. Have a purpose in your life beyond you, so do something so that you are looking beyond your own nose. And that could be work. That could be volunteer work. But basically, no matter whether you're still in the working world, whether you're retired, stay engaged. Have a purpose. Maintain an active social life. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to be a social butterfly with 35 friends, but it does mean have somebody, have at least a couple of people that you can call on to talk about things, to have coffee with, to be with. That social connection is so important. Share your feelings, particularly when you're having a rough time. Work to have a positive attitude, and sometimes in order to have a positive attitude, we have to work through some of those difficult feelings. Balance work and pleasure. Stress and emotional wellness are important. Stress, depression, they are risk factors for Alzheimer's disease. Stress, when we're under stress, our body releases chemicals that are damaging to our brains and to other cells. Think of your brain cells as having steel wool rubbing against them in a way. That's happening when we're under stress. So if we are feeling very stressed, if we are feeling depressed, doing what we can to deal with that. And if we can't do it on our own, seeing someone, getting counseling, getting some help from a professional so that we can work to, as much as possible, deal with the negative effects of those feelings. Stress reduction techniques sometimes is, we can do it ourselves, meditating. That can be a wonderful way to just deep breathing. But do see a doctor if you need help with that or with depression for sure. Meditation and prayer is so important, any kind of spiritual practice, and it doesn't have to be organized religion, although it certainly can be. But it can be your own personal prayer, meditation, being out in nature, art. For some people, going to an art gallery and just looking at the beauty of the creations in the art gallery can go a long way towards feeding their soul. Practicing calmness, just being in the moment and calm. Using humor. Humor is really good brain training. I don't think there's probably any really good comic who isn't really bright. It takes a good head to be able to really use humor well. And so appreciating that humor, appreciating comedy, and particularly there's some really articulate comics. And that's a way to train our brains, to try and keep up with their fast brain and follow where their humor leads. Humor increases hope. It lowers blood pressure. You have a good, long belly laugh. Whew, you feel good at the end of that. That's how that helps. Now, if you do have access to the internet, we do have a section, we connect with the section on from Alzheimer Canada on brain health. And so what I just talked about this last little while is pretty much laid out in that section. You think back on what I've just gone through in the last 45 minutes, it's really common sense. But as with so many things, it's uncommon common sense, These are things that often we know we should do and we don't. Yes, I know I should exercise, but I don't have time. Yes, I know I should floss my teeth, but I'm too tired by the time I'm getting ready for bed. That kind of thinking that we really have to say, you know what? Making time for me, that's important time. And I really have to carve out those extra 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 35 minutes for me. It's important for my wellness right now, for my mental wellness, my physical wellness, but it's important over the long haul as well. So to summarize, dementia is not a normal part of aging. Brain health is vital in the fight against dementia. Keep your brain engaged, challenge yourself, learn new things. A healthy lifestyle will benefit your body and your brain. Take care of your body, stay active. Get off that couch, it seems like almost anything that ails you